Hi, everyone. I'm Rick Barron, your host, and welcome to my podcast, That's Life, I Swear. My guest today is David Simmons, a former high-tech executive who swapped the corporate life for salt air in the turquoise seas. Growing up surfing the waves of Santa Barbara, David always had a deep love for the ocean. Now, after retiring, he took that passion to the next level. What do I mean by that? He launched a very successful charter tour sailing business in the Caribbean. Today we're going to explore his bold journey of reinvention, the realities of navigating uncharted waters, and what it means to truly follow your dreams. Please join me as I have my conversation with David Simmons. David, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you, Rick. It's great to see you.
Yeah, I just thought I'd share with the audience. The last time I saw David was about 22 years ago. And I think we both shared it. We don't understand where the time went. And the way I found you, David, was I was just cruising Facebook one day, and I saw one of your postings, and I thought, wow, he's got a sailboat. What's he doing out there? At first, I just thought you were on a tour with someone else, but then I realized as time progressed, I thought, oh, no, this guy has started his own business. So that's what really prompted me to want to get some time and talk to you about how you got into that. But now, are you originally from California?
I like to think so, but actually not. I was born in Jackson, Mississippi, and my mother was a Californian who married a sailor in the Navy, and they met in San Diego, and we ended up eloping and moving to the Deep South for a few years, but it was a very stressful time in 1960 through 64 in the Deep South, and my mother really didn't want to raise her kids in what felt like an unhealthy environment, and so she grabbed the kids and jumped on a train and made way back to California. So I've been in California ever since, but I still have lots of family in the Deep South and some great memories of, fishing and hunting and hanging out with close family and eating good food in the South.
Oh, that's great. So I understand you grew up in Santa Barbara, and I guess you spent a good portion of your time living there, or where else did you live besides Santa Barbara?
Yeah, we moved there when I was about 9 or 10 from, I don't know, I think we were in the LA area. My childhood was a little bit tumultuous, but in 1970, my mother enrolled at UCSB to get her PhD, or, to work on her degree, eventually her PhD in medieval history. And she was a widow by then because she'd remarried, and my stepfather had passed away. He'd crashed on a motorcycle. So, yeah. So, she bought a small, modest home in Santa Barbara near the ocean. It's definitely worth a couple million right now. And I grew up there, and she was busy, and I had 2 brothers, and the 3 of us got in a lot of trouble and had a lot of fun. And eventually my mother decided she wanted to complete her PhD work in England or France, and we ended up, the whole family, moving there, and we moved to London, and both my brothers were in school there, and I took the year to travel in Europe and North Africa. I actually spent a winter in Morocco and southern France and Spain surfing, and so that's kind of when I got my travel bug, was during that time living over there.
I was just about to say, it sounds like you've been around the world. I think I read somewhere, I don't know if it was your website, where where you have surfed, you've done deep sea diving and boating in places such as Europe, Mexico, Africa, Hawaii, Central America. So, how do you describe that adventure? I mean, going to all these places at that time, I guess when you're fairly young.
Yeah, so my travel was kind of bookending my career and my family time. So, out of college, I traveled quite a bit. Again, my mother was in Asia at that time, and I spent time in Southeast Asia at her place after I graduated. And I just, always loved the water and got scuba certified. And I mentioned to you a while ago that I actually was a whitewater rafting guide too for about 10 10 or 12 years, I met some really good guys in the Santa Cruz area that ran their own boating business, and they taught me how to be a guide, and I spent many years with them on weekends. When you and I were working at Sun, I'd go away and do trips down all these California rivers. And so, I just kind of always had a need to be outside, to be in the water. I find the water's really, it's soothing and healing and exciting and all of the things combined. And of course, surfing in Santa Cruz was a revelation for me, because Santa Barbara is quite small and protected and doesn't get much in the way of big waves. And then you get to Santa Cruz and it's like, my God, the waves are huge. The water's freezing. There's giant sharks in the water, and it's so intense. And I don't know, I did that for a while too. And so that's kind of where I got the love. And then I worked for I can't believe it, 30 years in tech, of which 21 were with you and others at Sun, where I also encountered a bunch of great people. I had some really fabulous bosses and I learned so much and loved Sun so much. And, and then started a family and, started doing long commutes and didn't have time for that much, travel and exploration. But I didn't quit doing it. I just did it a lot less. Yeah. So after I retired, I just kind of gravitated right back towards the stuff I love. I had lost a little bit of that, enthusiasm and excitement and feeling of adventure in the many years of long commutes and long work hours and all that stuff. And I just decided it was time to try and recapture some of that.
So did you always have this dream that one day you wanted to buy a boat? I mean, was it right after you retired and you feel like, okay, what do I do with myself? Because it wasn't until I saw those photos on your Facebook account that I started seeing, God, he sure goes down there a lot. And I mean, that's a good piece of traveling, from Santa Barbara to the Caribbean. But when did you get that bug that, this is what I want to do?
Yeah, a lot of people assume that I must have been a sailing guy in my whole life because I bought a boat and I've been living on it. But the truth is that I was a seasick surfer. I would go out on dive boats and fishing boats and I'd be like, oh my God, I'm gonna be sick, because there's something about the way those boats, feel and handle in the surf, when you're sideways to the seas and you're on a boat full of live bait and diesel smoke and, looking down at your gear, tying your fishing lines or putting on your scuba stuff. That always made me feel nauseous. I thought I was cursed with seasickness, and I still dove and I didn't fish that much, but I still went out on boats to dive, but I really didn't like being on boats. And it was kind of pure chance how I got the boat bug. And some friends of mine, one of my best friends, and we go every year. We have an annual boys backpacking trip. I think we're going to do number 43, this year. And it's kind of morphed, right? And it's not just backpacking, but we decided to charter a 45-foot Beneteau, a monohull, and out of Long Beach. And we sailed to Catalina for 4 days. And it was right at the beginning of COVID. And, there were all these fires up in Santa Cruz. We lost 900 homes up there in Santa Cruz in the community. And like the sky, even all the way down there in Santa Barbara area or the Channel Islands was red, and brown with the smoke. And so it was kind of surreal. And we went out there and I just remember that feeling of the sailboat, being under sail and how stable it was and how beautiful and peaceful, without the engines. And, I always thought sailing was going to be kind of boring, but there was so much going on. And so I have sailed small boats and catamarans and things like that. But I don't know. It just got me. And one of the things that got me was like at night, I didn't like being below deck. I still don't really love being below deck. But I hung my hammock on the jib to the mast, and I spent the night looking up at the full moon, swinging in the hammock for a couple nights, and
wow.
it was just magical. And I just asked myself, why am I not doing this? And so that started me on my journey. And I back in Santa Cruz, I was teaching high school then, and things were shutting down because of COVID. And I started taking all of the American sailing classes, ASA 101, 3, 4, 5, 6. and then eventually 114, which is catamaran sailing. And at the same time, I did a couple of charters in the U.S. and British Virgin Islands over the summer because as I was teaching school, I had summers off. And I actually had a rental place that required me to be out for the summer because they turned it into like a really high-priced beach rental, but I got it for cheap during the year. So I had to disappear for 3 months, right? And so it was perfect. I got time off work, got to leave my place, buy a ticket, I'm heading to the Caribbean or Mexico, and I just spent the summers going and checking out boats and doing some chartering with a good friend of mine, and that's when I realized, I want to buy a catamaran. And the catamaran's different than a monohull. It's just got a lot of space, and it handles different, and purists don't always like them, but for me, I don't get seasick. In fact, once or twice, probably twice in the last 3 years when the weather's been.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, why the catamaran, but I think you already answered that question. So before you started your charter tour business, did you have the mindset, okay, I have to get all this training and understand the various idiosyncrasies of what it takes to sail a boat before I even begin to think if I can start my own business? I mean, did that all happen prior, or was it kind of in parallel?
I just kind of, I didn't really have it in my mind to start any sort of business yet. I mean, it was in the back of my head that boats are expensive and it'd be nice if I could make some money with my boat. But I took all of the ASA courses because I wanted to know what I was doing, and I wanted to be able to charter boats and not have to pay a captain wherever we went. I wanted to be captain. I like it. I like sailing, and I like being in charge. And
I kind of got that notion.
I wanted to be the boat captain, and I wanted to know what I was doing. So I took all the ASA stuff, but I also decided to get my merchant marine credential, the MMC. It's like they call it a 6-pack because you're allowed captain's license. I'm allowed to take it's a Coast Guard license, allows me to take up to 6 passengers on an undocumented vessel. So something that's not like a ferry or a commercial boat, I could take them out with the license. And it was a lot of work, and I did it online, and it took like 8 or 9 months to do it while I was sailing through the Caribbean. I was online all the time, and in the end, you take proctored exams where they take over your computers and make sure you aren't, looking at notes or the internet. They watch you, and then you have to send in your work, all your notes and copies of the chart plotting that you do. And it was pretty extensive, and I learned a ton. And now I'm working on my master captains, which is, so you have to have 360 days of sea time for the first thing. And that's a lot, right? And then you have to have 720 to get your master's. And so I'm pushing that right now. I think I'm there because in the last 2.5 years, when you live on a boat, you can self-certify a bunch of that time.
When you talk about getting your license, is that like getting a driver's license where, okay, you have to renew it every 4 years, or is it just one time and it's like, hey, you're good to go now?
No, you do have to do some renewals, but usually if you keep it current, you don't have to take about the exams all over again. There are some remedial stuff that you need to review. You also have to get an extensive health certificate and do drug testing and all that like every 2 years. So they're really trying to make sure that people with commercial or even non-commercial captain's licenses are safe and healthy. And that was part of the process too. It meant going back, and I had to find a new doctor and do a whole bunch of tests and whatnot. And so that was interesting.
So when you arrived at that time where you felt like, okay, I'm ready to take this casual sailing now into a full-flown business, what was the process of getting that started? And what did you learn along the way as you were doing all that?
Yeah, well, it's been a journey, and I know you introduced me as highly successful, and I'll take that, but it's also a bit generous because my business is still nascent. And, for me, what I had struggled with is like, okay, am I a circumnavigator? Am I someone who's gonna, circumnavigate the globe because I can, because it's a challenge and I'll learn so much and it'll be fabulous and I love sailing? Or am I a charter boat captain that makes money by chartering my boat and other boats? And there's really 3 kind of business opportunities for a captain. You can charter your own boat and take people out on it, or you can be a captain on other people's boats, even like just for rent for the week, and just be a captain for hire, or you can do boat delivery, and that could be long-term or short-term. You could just move a boat, across the ocean, or you could manage a boat for someone who's got a bunch of money but can't be on the boat all the time, but maybe wants to fly to someplace every 2 months and have you take them sailing for a week or two. To me, that sounds like a super sweet gig, and I haven't found one yet, but I've met some guys doing some pretty amazing stuff, and they're super seasoned, and yeah, they're few and far between. But man, I met this one guy. He was sailing a Sunreef 80, which is huge, 80-foot, top of the line, primo cat. I don't know how much the thing was worth, like 10 or 12 million. And he was, I think he was Norwegian, and he takes care of the boat. Him and his girlfriend, they move it around for him, and when the owner and his family comes on board, they take care of him. When he's gone, he just keeps the boat in ship shape and enjoy it, living on it. So there's some pretty incredible opportunities out there. And for me, it's evolving. I don't really have I'm not locked into any model yet. That's the good news and the bad news.
I see. So there's a lot of options, more than I could have imagined, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I've done a little bit of the two things. I've had people on my boat and taken them out. I've done a lot of that, though I've only had, a handful of paying customers that kind of we went through the whole, let's sign a contract and get you provision and do all that. I've also been doing sort of informal charters for friends and family friends and things like that for a while. And those are always fun. I love doing that. The perfect charter guests for me are not people who want to be weighted on hand and foot, but people who are like-minded, people interested in sailing and having a good time. And I know there's way more money in the very, high-end, high-touch, but I need more crew to do that than just myself. And that's not really my target audience for.
Well, yeah, I think, I don't know if it's called, your limitations, but you know what you have a real passion for. That, yeah, I could do this, but am I going to be happy doing it?
Yeah, that's right. And I've also, you asked about things I've learned. One of the things I've learned is that it's hard to make your boat your home full time and your charter business. It's there's not a lot of extra space, and just to keep it clean and tidy and welcoming for guests, you really have to just isolate your stuff and your living, and you have to create some guest space that's really theirs. And luckily the catamaran I have allows for that, because one side of the boat is my side, the other side is the guest side. And so there's a nice, we have shared living spaces, but they have their own space. So that works out really good.
I noticed again, looking at your Facebook account, I've seen a few pictures where you're kind of tinkering with some of the parts of the boat, so to speak. I guess where I'm going with this, and I think you kind of alluded to it, it's almost like it's like a 24/7 operation, because there are things you have to do in preparation for your guests. You have to take care of the boat, and I guess you got to be a jack of all trades when you're dealing with boat parts, I would imagine, because sometimes you just can't take it down to your local hardware store and say, hey, can you fix this for me?
No, that's understatement of the year. Yeah, if you don't like to work on stuff, and if you're not, handy and a problem solver and using tools and stuff, don't buy a boat unless you've got a endless credit card and hire some people to work on it for you. There's always stuff that needs maintenance, and there's times when things break, and sometimes they happen like in 3s and 10s when like everything's just going wrong and you're going, oh my God, get me off of here. But I've always enjoyed building stuff and working with my hands. And, I taught robotics in high school, and I ran a factory at Sun, and before Sun for 10 years. And I've worked construction and all that. And I do like fixing and building. And luckily, this boat I had like so many tools. The previous owner was kind of a tool freak like me. And so I've got like a tool for everything, except for a good multi-tool. And so, yeah, I'm often fixing things, and sometimes I'll post like 10 pictures of me working on stuff just to remind people that it's not all rainbows and unicorns. Sometimes it's hot and messy and stuff's not working, and you just got to get it fixed. There's not a lot of debate. Whether it's your anchor, your windlass that raises your anchor, you can't not have it working. It's really hard to pull up, 300 pounds of chain and another 60 pounds of anchor by hand every time you drop anchor. You got to get your stuff working. And
so it's a lifestyle that you can't sit there and wonder what you're going to do. No, I got to figure this out. I mean, I have to imagine that there's been moments where you've been out in the middle of the ocean and something happened. And it's like, how in the hell do I get back to port now? Has that ever happened to you?
Yeah, I've had a couple. I mean, people think that sailors like me who've traveled 10,000 miles in the last 3 years spend a large amount of their time in the open ocean. And the truth is, it's 98% of the time I'm within sight of land, because the Caribbean has got so many islands, beginning with the Bahamas, which is not the Caribbean, North Atlantic, all the way down the Bahamas for hundreds of miles. There's like just the Exumas. There's a stretch of islands in the Bahamas. There's 650 islands in just the Exumas. So it's a 100-mile stretch of island. There's 650 islands. It's fabulous. It's an ocean and land sea wonderland. It's called the Land and Sea Park, most of Exuma is, and it's the most stunning clear water, blue water I've seen. You can see it from space. It's so insane, the Bahama Banks. But anyway, the point is that you're almost always within sight of land unless you're making a big passage. And fortunately, 95% of things that go wrong when you're inside of land. And you get to an anchorage, a safe anchorage, or a marina or whatever, safely, and then you can deal with it. But a couple times I've had stuff go wrong. Once we were actually my first week in the actual ocean outside of Chesapeake, when I bought the boat and stayed in the Chesapeake for 2 months, basically learning how to single hand sail the boat. And the Chesapeake has 12,000 miles of shoreline. It's incredible. It's such a big bay, and it's beautiful. It's easier than being in the ocean when you're learning. So the first big sail I did was from Hampton, Virginia, out the Chesapeake and around Cape Hatteras, the graveyard of the Atlantic, and then 800 miles south, including crossing the Gulf Stream, to Marsh Harbor, Abacos. And I did it with 2 other crew that I had just met, and it was a 6-day passage. And about midway, we were about 300 miles offshore, and we lost a bolt that holds the boom into the mast fell out, and it was because my handheld Garmin, I turned it on and it overrode the settings on the autopilot at the helm, because they all talk to each other, Lowrance, Simrad, Garmin, and turned the boat around into a really stiff wind and high seas, and it slammed the boat around so much it knocked this pin out. And so we had to figure out it was jammed, and we had to get it loose. We had to put new bolts in and nuts on it and do all that in the middle of 35 knot winds and 12-foot seas, and turn the boat around and keep going. And we ended up 3 days later flying into Marsh Harbor with Tropical Storm Nicole kind of breathing down our neck. And, it was exciting. It was exciting. But, it builds your confidence when you deal with these problems.
I would imagine you have to have a steady mind, knowing that this is no time to panic. And
you know what?
Go ahead.
I was just say, Rick, what? I'm glad you mentioned that, because for some reason I have this thing where I stay calm when everyone else is panicking. And the other thing I do is, like, when there's a fire and everyone's running away, I kind of walk towards it and oh, okay, does somebody need help? I'm not saying I should be a firefighter. I'm not. But yeah, even like in rafting or whatever, I've learned that there's really no situation that panicking will make better. And that's the thing you learn scuba diving, is that whenever something goes wrong, you stop. You stop whatever you're doing. You breathe, right? You got to take a breath because you're underwater, and you think, what is the problem? What am I going to do about it? And if you can do that in a crisis, or what could be a crisis, you can avoid it or you can deal with it. That's, I think, one of the things that's important if you want to do what I'm doing, is you do have to have the ability to just sort of look at things analytically and calmly and sort of okay, well, what do I need to do to fix this?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You said something I want to kind of go back to just briefly. You were a teacher?
Yeah. Well,
I didn't know that.
yeah. So after I retired from Oracle, because Sun acquired Oracle, and I was there for 8 years at Oracle, and I retired in 2018. I didn't really know what I was going to do next, and I did some volunteer work around ocean stuff, and I was like, okay, well, what's going to bring me, inspiration and be useful to people, and one of the things I tried was I tried substitute teaching for a little while, and I tried some younger years, and I'm like, oh, shoot me, right? And then I ended up filling in at a high school at the San Lorenzo Valley SOV High School in Felton, and they had a computer science and robotics program where they'd lost their instructor founder, and I filled in for a few weeks, and they asked me if I was interested in the position. And at first I said, no, there's no way I can do this. There's way too much. And then, so they had me interview some candidates, and I thought, I can do better than these guys. I'll take the job. And so I ended up doing that for 4 years. I ran their computer science, robotics, and AP computer science classes for a few years.
Wow, that's amazing.
And then COVID hit, and everything changed. It was teaching remote, and then kids with masks, and enrollment was down, and they started cutting hours and classes and funds, and I just couldn't do it anymore. So that's when I decided to go sailing.
Well, those are some tough years for a lot of people. Now, I think I saw on your website, you promote your tour business, that you also provide boat delivery services. I think you mentioned that early on, but I didn't know you actually do that yourself.
Well, so it's aspirational. I basically have the skills and the credentials to do it, but I haven't done any boat delivery yet. But those are the three services that I promote in my business is, I'll be captain on your boat or your charter boat. So I have friends in Australia that I was over there with another friend on a trip last January, not this one, the one before, and they said, well, we're chartering a boat in the Whitsundays in the southern barrier reef, but we don't have a captain, and you're going to be over here. Do you want to come captain our boat? And I said, well, sure. And so, I went and did that for them, and it was fabulous. I loved it because it wasn't my boat. I could take good care of it, but, when shit broke, I was like, yeah, I'm taking it back, and I'm going to tell them this isn't working, and it's not my problem, I loved doing that, and I've done a couple other trips. I've done it in Mexico and in the Virgin Islands. I've done a couple of short trips where I've acted as captain for friends and family and whatnot. I have not done the boat delivery thing, and it depends on what kind of boat it is and how far. If it's a boat that's very difficult to single hand, then of course I'd have to have crew. And if it involves overnight passages of any significance, I would have to have a crew to help, because it's, maritime law says you always have to have someone on watch, and I can't stay awake for 4 days.
Right.
For 35 hours.
Now, in the time you've been doing this business, even with your sailing adventures prior to starting a business,
yeah,
I have to imagine you've come across a lot of individuals who are like you. They love being out there in the ocean. And I know you mentioned a couple that were taking care of a boat because it was like, what a dream to be, in this 80-foot boat. But can you share a story or someone that really was a big influence on you as you've been sailing thus far that really had an impact on, gosh, I was fortunate to have met this person because he or she gave me so much insight into the world of sailing that I thought I knew, but I've learned something from them.
Well, there's one entity that has taught me more than anything, and her name is Mother Ocean. And I will tell you, my first year of sailing, I had a motto, which is I learn something new every day, every single day. And, whether it was big or it was little, it's just stuff would happen, it'd be like, yeah, I didn't press the latch on that cabinet in my bathroom before I made a passage that day. And the seas got big and that cabinet door swung open and all of the chemicals in there fell on the floor and one of them cracked and leaked boat polish all over the floor. And then I came in to go to the then I came in to go to the bathroom and I tried to clean it up and it was slippery everywhere and it made me nauseous and I almost was seasick for the rest of the trip. And then when I cleaned it up, water got in, the shower overflowed, and it made the slipperiest surface on the planet of the earth, and I almost fell and broke my neck. It's like all it was that one button. I didn't press that one button. I didn't latch that cabinet. I didn't secure it before making way, and I could have broken my neck or whatever. I was seasick for 24 hours. And stuff like that used to happen to me every day. Or maybe I didn't quite tie a knot right. I was lazy or something like that. And then that knot came loose and that line could have got caught in the prop. And then I would have lost steering on my boat right as I was going through the harbor and would have rammed into all the boats on the dock. It's just like stuff like that would just happen all day long to me. And the key for me is that you've got to make those mistakes to learn. And it's just time on the water. And I see now why the captain's license requires 360 days of sea time, because you really can't have that experience if you don't spend the time and make the mistakes and pay attention. So I would say that is probably the biggest teacher to me is just experience. With that said, there's a couple of standout folks that I've met along the way that I've cruised with. But, because I'm a solo sailor and a lot of the people that come on my boat aren't that experienced, it's hard for me to learn that much. It's more of a challenge for me to teach them enough to be of use on the boat and to also feel useful, which is something that's really important when you have people on the boat. You need to do it. So, there's a handful of guys I've learned some good stuff with. My older brother, Jerry, has come on the boat multiple times with me, and he was a sailor before me. He owned a small Catalina, but it's completely different, and we learned a lot about working together because he's my big brother, and he's a sailor and I'm not, and he had to learn, no, I'm the captain and I can own the decisions. And so there was some really interesting power plays, but you know what, he is great crew and I'm a better captain for it, having had him on board multiple times. And anytime I need him, he's retired, I can call him up and he'll come down and he'll help me move the boat. I sailed from Bonaire to Puerto Rico with him. Oh my God, it was such a rough ride. It was 4 days across the Caribbean from Venezuela basically up to Puerto Rico. And we had rough seas and high winds, and we were actually pointing to the Virgin Islands. We couldn't make it because the wind was too northerly, and we ended up in Puerto Rico. But it ended up being fabulous because the Puerto Rico Virgin Islands are so cool and nobody knows about them.
So you were working in the Caribbean for quite a while. Now you took a pivot and you went to Panama.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
I had made the circuit around the Caribbean to, there's the northern, the Antilles, and then there's the leewards and the windwards, and then the ABCs. They kind of circle the Caribbean. And I don't really like staying in one spot for extended periods unless there's something there really fabulous. And I'm always looking for that next new adventure. And so I had gone, my first goal was to get from the Bahamas to the Eastern Caribbean. And that's quite difficult. It's known as the thorny path. And a lot of sailors say, no, you can't do it. You got to go to Bermuda and go straight down if you want to go to the Eastern Caribbean. You can't go down the Bahamas and sail into the trade winds. But there's a way to do it, and it's pretty well documented, and it's tricky. And it took me 6 weeks, but I got it done. And then once I was in the Eastern Caribbean, I was kind of in a hurry to get down to Grenada because of my insurance. I have to be south of 12 degrees after July 1st. So I had to blow through the Eastern Caribbean, and there's some fabulous islands along the way, English, French, Dutch, colonizers, and a lot of them are still independent. The French still hold a few territories that are actually arrondissements and departments of France, like Martinique and whatnot. But But they were interesting, and I had a good time, but I was in a hurry, and I liked Grenada a lot, but after a while, I kind of you're kind of restricted to southern Grenada. I got a little bit kind of bored with it, and so I decided to go check out the ABCs. And Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao are really unique islands. They're right off the coast of Venezuela, about 30 miles, and they're very dry. And the water is super clear, and some of the best diving in the world, and they're Dutch territories, but they have a really unique culture. They speak Papiamento. It's the only two countries in the world, Bonaire and Curacao, where they speak it. It's a combination of African, Portuguese, Spanish, English, and Dutch. And it's just they're really amazing places. And Bonaire, the island of Bonaire, the whole island is a marine park with like over almost 100 dive sites just on the leeward side. The whole island you can't drop your anchor. You have to pick up a mooring ball. You could dive all day long. Love it there. I had a really great time. And Curaçao's different. They live off extraction industries there. They've got, Bonaire had a bunch of salt mines. I mean, they were called the useless islands by the Spanish. They used them basically the Dutch took over and used them for slave transport. They moved 8 million West Africans to Brazil through Curacao. And over in Saba, they moved 6 million to North America. In Curacao, they have giant oil refineries. I mean, enormous oil refineries, and they're usually doing Venezuelan oil. The sanctions complicate things, but anyway, I really loved being in those places, and I've had friends and family come and stay, and I would say if I was to put down roots somewhere, that I would definitely consider those places. They have kind of a European lifestyle and standard of living, fabulous weather and water. I'm not sure what the immigration restrictions are, but I wasn't ready to settle down when I went through there. But I really love those places. But again, I wanted to go back and see, other parts of the Caribbean that I had to go through in more of a hurry. So my brother and I, we went back to the Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and I wanted to do work on my boat. You're always working on your boat. I had to get my boat hauled out and bottom paint, and I had about 20 grand worth of work done on the boat in the BVIs. And then I went back and did that whole circuit again. And by the time I got to Bonaire and Curacao, I thought, well, I might as well go see Aruba. And Aruba is totally Americanized, and it's okay, it's got its charm, but it kind of wasn't a place I wanted to stay. So I was like, well, where to now? I guess I'll keep going west because that's downwind, and I'll head to Panama. And that was quite an adventure. That was 5 days, and it goes along the coast of Colombia, Venezuela and Colombia, and I'm not allowed in either of those countries for insurance purposes because there's not a lot of safe anchorages. There's some piracy and crime, and so it was 5 days of traveling downwind with an young Austrian man that came with me. We had a great time.
Just listening to you describe the various islands, places that you've been to, the people, did you anticipate this is what it would be like when you went down there to start your business and to start sailing to various parts? Because the way you are describing things, I could just hear the excitement in your voice and in your face that these places just resonated with you, that it's like, wow, this is even more that I could have hoped for.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I love the natural beauty. I am just stunned by how much natural beauty there is in these places. And I love being in the water. I used to spend 2 or 3 hours a day just with I do my work on my boat, whatever I need to do my shopping, do some chores, go online because I have Starlink, so I'm super connected. But I will always save like an hour or two sometime during the day to just jump in the water with my snorkel gear and my GoPro and go look for stuff. And I'm never disappointed. I mean, I always would see something, especially in the parts of the Caribbean before. There are a few places that it's just murky and rough, kind of like parts of Panama I'm in right now. But man, a lot of these islands I would go to, I would hop in, and I'd see Caribbean reef squid or a slipper lobster or a couple of, really beautiful, southern stingrays or a couple of turtles, snacking on the bottom, or maybe a nurse shark asleep under a ledge, or these really friendly, cute trunkfish, one of my favorites. And just I could name them all. I mean, it's like I made friends with them. It's like I know them, right? And I don't do that much fishing, spear fishing. Occasionally I do, but I don't like random line fishing where you have a lot of bycatch and stuff. I'll take fish either deep sea or trolling for specific species, or go in and spear something that I know what I'm taking. Yeah, I'm in love with the wildlife and the beauty. And I fly a drone for some great aerial shots, and that keeps me busy. The people, I meet a lot of really nice people, but because I don't go into marinas and pay for a slip on a dock. I anchor for free in like a beautiful anchorage, and everybody has space. You don't park your boat within speaking distance of the next boat unless you want to crash into them, right? And so you only have a chance really to engage with other sailors and people on shore when you make the opportunity. You get in your dinghy and you go to a dock and you walk to a restaurant, or you go to an event that you heard about on Facebook or something. And there's some really cool sailing communities. Like in Curacao, there was a lot of fun community activities. We would do, sundowners, we call it, where we'd have a little bonfire on the beach and share some food and drink, and someone bringing a guitar, and that'd be fun. I mean, I love doing that. We had trick-or-treaters in Curacao. All the kids would come on in dinghies to the back of your boat, all dressed up, looking great, because people spend the whole hurricane season in Grenada and Curacao because they have to, because you can't be in the hurricane pass. And so that whole stuff, I had no idea what that was going to be like, and it just is really joyful just to discover these things along the way.
In the time you've been down there, from the time you made that transition to go to the Caribbean, starting your business, and where you are today, what have you learned about yourself? What thoughts flowed through your head that, well, I was here and now I'm here, and in between that, I learned the following about yourself? What sticks out?
That's a really good question. For me, like the last 4 or 5 years have been really transformative. I think being in sort of the Silicon Valley, hustle and bustle and, pursuit of status and wealth and recognition and all that can be distracting from some of the other rewards of life, like family and friends and community and personal sort of health and peace of mind and serenity. A lot of that stuff, I traded some of those things to get ahead and save enough money to go and live my dream, and some of it was a conscious decision to defer and to reprioritize, and some of it was unconscious. But what I realized is that some of the things that are available in life are priceless. You can't put a price on them, whether it's time with your kids and your friends, or doing things in life that inspire you and that create a sense of wonder and awe. There's something about looking up at a starlit night and seeing the Milky Way in great detail and stuff to just remind you of our place in the universe. And for me, being in nature is kind of that cathedral, for appreciating those things. And in some ways, it's like I appreciate the miracle of my life by seeing how insignificant it is in the scheme of things. And that's one of the things that this adventure has brought to me, is that sense of wonder and awe again, that maybe I had when I was a kid or younger. The other thing I've learned is that I like my alone time, but I am a social creature, and being alone and like isolated, for me, there was a time and a place when I was learning so much and I was seeing so much new stuff, and I had friends coming and going, and using like Facebook and stuff, I'm able to share what's going on. And that whole discovery and learning process was enough. But now that I've kind of matured into it or whatever, I'm more comfortable, I know some of the challenges, I'm really just craving being part of a community again, and having some relationships. I have friends back in Santa Cruz that I really miss, and I got a girlfriend back there I want to go spend time with. I realize that I can't be this lone wolf guy sailing around solo and taking on occasional charters or friends, and really be content with that indefinitely. I would love to circumnavigate. I'd love to go through the canal, go explore in Costa Rica, and then maybe head down to the Galapagos, and then do the passage over to the Marquesas and up to Tahiti and Fiji and Tonga and whatever, and keep going, but not alone, not without, some crew, long-term, and a soulmate to share it with. And so, I wasn't ready for that 3 years ago, but I kind of am now, and it's just taken me a while. It's a process that I had to go through, and now I'm trying to figure out what's next. And maybe my boat business shifts over time. As I mentioned to you, I'm going to be doing sailing instruction in Santa Cruz at Pacific Sail for at least the summer into the fall. And I expect to learn a lot, make some contacts. I will be back in Panama to do periodic trips on my boat, hopefully with clients. And then beyond that, it's hard to tell. I think if I do go do the South Pacific thing, it's going to be a little while, and probably on a different boat than this one. I love my boat. It's a great boat for what I'm doing. But if you're going to go cross the biggest ocean in the world, there's certain things you want in a boat that maybe this Caribbean queen doesn't have.
Well, maybe that's a dream that will come one day. You don't know what life is going to throw at you. I mean, it could happen next month for all we know. But there was one other question I wanted to ask of you. And again, I think I saw this on your website. It was regarding a poem by Charles, I hope I get this right, Bukowski?
I think so.
Okay. And you said that you loved it because it resonates with you. Can you share what that means? Only if you want to.
No. I don't want to pretend that I'm some, deeply read philosopher who has chosen Bukowski as my guiding light. I'm more of a Facebook Reels viewer who sees something, a squirrel, and I go, oh, that's a cute squirrel. The thing that resonated about the Bukowski quote, and I probably should have reviewed it, it's something along the lines of, don't ever let life's challenges and, pressures rob you of living a full life, and basically, always strive for living the fullest life you can, and finding your joy, finding your place in life. And sometimes you're going to feel beaten down, but don't ever give up. And I may not be quoting it right, but I think it was along those lines. And I also saw, what's his name? Gosh, I'm drawing a blank on him. He's an actor. He was on Jurassic Park. He's one of the docs. He's a comedian.
Right.
Anyway.
Okay.
Basically, he was saying, the way he views life is that life is like this torch, this beautiful, flaming torch of beauty and light and excitement. And he doesn't feel like aging is like your torch dimming and snuffing out. He feels like, you keep carrying that torch until your time is over, and then you hand it to the next generation to carry it and to keep it bright and, and exciting. And that's, inspiring to me too, being a parent with kids, with wonderful kids, and just hopefully passing on some of my insights and joy to the people around me and my friends and clients and everybody, is that, life is like this fabulous, fireworks display. And, my time is to celebrate it and hand it off to others, when it's their time. And that's kind of how I want to live my life going forward, is to not, don't fizzle out. Don't give in. Don't, lose your joy and your sparkle.
I mean, you're only here really in reality, kind of like a blink of an eye, because you think of how many people have come before me and how many people are going to come after me. It's when you break it down into years, days, hours, minutes, you don't want to have to look back and say, man, I could have done it, but I didn't. Why? You don't want to have any regrets.
That's right.
Even if you attempted and failed,
Yeah,
you learn from the failure.
that's
You
right.
do.
No, you remind me of a quote. So I'm going to plug a friend, a YouTuber that I really love. His name's Colin McRae, and he's got a YouTube channel, and he sails. His boat is called Parlay, and his sailing channel is Parlay Revival. He's a Kiwi, and he was on Life Below Deck. I guess he's a super yacht engineer, young guy, so cool, so smart. Bought a hurricane damaged Lagoon 450 in the BVI's and fixed it up, and he's been sailing it, going for about 4 years now. And I love the guy. Every week he puts out a new episode every Sunday. And he says in the beginning of the opening is that it's not the things in life that you did that you'll regret. In the end, it'll be the things you didn't do. And I agree mostly. We all have our regrets about things that we did, wrong. But the truth is that I don't want to regret all the things I never tried that I really wanted to, because it's now, baby. This is it.
Oh.
And, go try it, see if you like it. If you don't,
Well, it's like, real quickly, when I turned 75, my wife, God bless her, pulled together a birthday party for me at our house, and had so many people over here. And prior to people showing up, she said, "Oh, I want to show you something." I said, "Okay." So she was decorating the whole house with balloons and everything. She took me into our living room, and over the fireplace was this big banner saying "Happy 70th Birthday." David, when I saw the word 70, or the letter 75, or the number 75, excuse me, I thought, dang, I've arrived. And it made me think, not that I never thought about it, but just it hit home more to make me understand, brother, you got a lot of living to do, and don't waste it. Do not waste it. And
No, that's absolutely right. A very good friend of mine just turned 70 a couple weeks ago, and I was at his 70th party, and all the stuff that he's got planned and that he's doing is just amazing. I mean, he's in Corsica right now, riding like 1,000 miles around the island, and on bike. He's a bicyclist. At 70, he does 100-mile rides, and yeah, it's just crazy, and he's an inspiration. He is my buddy Conrad is an inspiration to me, and he's been on this boat quite a bit. I've worn his ass out, but he don't like the heat. It could be tough, but yeah, you're right. And as I get older, I feel a sense of urgency to do more. It's not like I want to slow down. It's like I want to speed up.
well, you become more, and speaking for myself, more sensitized to when you hear someone that you knew passed away, whether they were younger or older. And it's like, wow, I mean, I just talked with them 2 weeks ago and now they're gone. It makes you wake up to the fact that life is here to be cherished, and just dive in.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean simple things don't bring great joy too. And sometimes just being present in a simple moment, whether it's with yourself or with nature or with a puppy in your lap or whatever, it's just appreciating life's moments. They don't have to be peak experiences all the time. And that's something I struggle with, because I'm kind of a, I wouldn't say adrenaline junkie, but I'm kind of a peak experience junkie. I'm always like trying to find something new and inspiring, but sometimes it's just right there. You just need to slow down and look at it. Yeah.
So David, I guess in closing, I want to ask you, I don't know, pearls of wisdom that you might want to pass on to somebody who may want to look into what you're doing today, in sailing. What maybe, two thoughts come to mind that, if you're going to do this, keep this in mind.
Yeah, I think if you feel like you have an interest in doing something like this, the best way to find out is just to get started. It's that old journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step, and go take a sailing course, or go volunteer on a afternoon sailboat trip. There's a lot of yacht harbors that are, yachting clubs that are always looking for crew, and, just go out and try it. And if you find that you enjoy it and it's inspiring, don't be afraid to invest some time and some money and, follow the path, figure out what, are the steps to getting to where you're skilled enough to actually charter your own boat, and then try chartering a boat and see how you like it, and then take a look and see what you can afford, and don't feel like you have to have the biggest, baddest boat. Just get started with something and try that for a while, and don't be afraid to start the process, because it'll become clear pretty quickly whether you love it or not. So that and look up CaptainDaveSailing.com if you want to come down and see sloths and monkeys and turtles and go sailing on beautiful ocean, white sandy beaches.
So David, I really want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to sit down and talk about your life in the world of sailing and the adventures you're having. Again, it's been a long time, but it's damn great to see you again, and it's good to see you that you're in good health and that you're enjoying your life and you're having a blast. I really applaud you for that.
Thank you, Rick. It's great to see you and to see you running this podcast series. I was really impressed when I looked at all the various guests and topics you've covered and all that. And it's a real honor for you to ask me to share my experience with you and your viewers.
Hey, thank you for that. And to the audience, I appreciate you joining in with us. And tune in next week, and we'll have another guest that will have a great conversation. And to that, we'll talk to you soon.